How wide open is the window of your awareness? Is the path to yourself? Is the door to your body, to your heart, to your soul? Are you to believing you can have any kind of life, many kinds of lives, to realizing every waking day, every dreaming night, you're swimming in a wide, open sea of potentiality? Welcome to the latest Floating Poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to the 83rd show in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the deeply shaped and shaping coast of New England, from Rhode Island by the sea. This is your poet and poetorialist, Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. Last week we ventured into the unknown, from the hidden to the foreign to the curious, mysterious, and nameless, into realms of the unfamiliar, the uncertain, the unexplored. This week, sensing into your being-ness and our becomings, their sounding, resounding chords, whatever they are for you, and the passages between who and how we each are today, and what inner forms, embodiments, we can or may arrive at and into from here. To shine some greater light and thought on our theme, I curated a pooling of cultural commentary, poetry, and inquiry. And as we step foot there, step mind, heart, and spirit there, I'd like to share for a moment some listeners' notes to me that have come over various broadcasts. From Jimmy in New York City. Colin, the floating poetry broadcasts are definitely being heard in this household, again and again, because they are of enduring value, both the material and the delivery of it. Material and delivery, who could ask for anything more? Thank you, Jimmy. From Russell out in San Francisco, wonderful stuff, astonished, feeling everything. Well, this for me is an always wish to delight and astonish when I can, and for listeners to feel, to really feel, to feel further in, deeper in. Thank you, Russell. Greg out in Marin, California. I love these expanded sessions. It really feels like you've got the space to take us on a deeper and more satisfying journey. Thank you, Greg. And yes, I began with shorter form offerings, but soon expanded the time to delve more generously into territory that really called for it. And this last, for now, is from Robin, right here in Rhode Island. And it's a question. It's a thought and a question. As I begin to listen to more and more poetry, my, quote, ear is beginning to change. For example, the adjectives pop and the adverbs lend in intensity. Can you explain what is happening? Is it the act of listening to audio only somehow changing the listening? I've always believed there's a difference between hearing and listening. Listening is a richer experience. Does poetry facilitate the richness? Well, since this question, I did put forth a broadcast number 81 on hearing and listening, apropos and the dimensions and differences between them. They're interrelated but not the same. So, a large reason I chose to make these programs, and in the form I have, is because it offers a, to me, missing way to explore and expand our beingness, our awareness, our wholefulness, aliveness. Also, as live cast versus pre-recorded podcasts, there's a dynamism and energy and electricity in and around the presenting I do and the engaged listening happening that we all feel. And not just when we're connecting at a given hour, but also felt when you listen to any replay. For those who have, you know the sensation. I also want people leaning into not be on yet another screen or distracted by visuals, to ease all that screen fatigue, and instead to relax and use their outer ears to listen and their inner ears and other inner senses to hear, to keen into the shared poetry and commentary flowing out over the airways. In the old radio days, the times before television in homes, the radio was a wonderful kind of hearth people would gather round with real intent and eagerness. And there were many programs, especially radio plays like Orson Welles' Mercury Theater, that would marvelously and to me more greatly engage and kindle and heighten everyone's imaginations. The purpose of these floating poetry broadcasts is to bring more of this experience, more immersion, more reflection, more dimension, and yes, richness. So too, the choice to have no active imagery other than one of my visual poems is a faceplate for each show that's reflective of each theme. I also desire, through these programs and my larger poetic arts, my poetosphere, from the spoken to the written to the visual and theatrically presented, to make poetry not only more delightful for lovers of these forms, but also newly inviting and accessible to a wider audience, especially those who didn't realize how understandable, enjoyable, and vitalizing it can be. Bringing poetry alive, afresh to those in the world, maybe you, hungry and thirsty for heart, mind, and spirit nourishment, for uplifting and inspiring. It works remarkably. Like everything meaningful when listeners come freely, are open and fully present, are listening closely and hearing deeply. Joseph Stroud has a poem that I feel fits to add as a footnote here before we go on, is Imagining, in parens, poetry. It's for Michael, his twin brother. We strung 50 feet of string between two cans, my brother on one side of the fence, me on the other. He talked into his can as I held mine to my ear, and then we would switch, whispering to each other our secrets, what we told no one else, hearing at each end only what we might imagine. All right, well, let's go on now to all into being and becoming with the genes of the soul. Amin Maalouf, Malouf, on how we inhabit our identity. A person's identity, she said in her book In the Name of Identity, is like a pattern drawn on a tightly stretched parchment. Touch just one part of it, just one allegiance, and the whole person will react. The whole drum will sound. I sometimes find myself examining my identity as other people examine their conscience. As you may imagine, my object is not to discover within myself some, quote, essential allegiance in which I may recognize myself. Rather the opposite. I scour my memory to find as many ingredients of my identity as I can. I then assemble and arrange them. I don't deny any of them. Any person of goodwill trying to carry out his or her own examination would soon, like me, discover that the identity is a special case. Mankind itself is made up of special cases. Life is a creator of differences. Each one of us has to make his way while choosing between the paths that are urged upon him or her and those that are forbidden or strewn with obstacles. They are not themselves from the outset, nor do they just, quote, grow aware of what they are. They become what they are. They don't merely grow aware of their identity, they acquire it, step by step. Thank you, Amin Maalouf. What would a portrait of your being sound or look or feel like today? Here's Edward Hirsch, self-portrait. I live between my heart and my head, like a married couple who can't get along. I live between my left arm, which is swift and sinister, and my right, which is righteous. I lived between a laugh and a scowl, and voted against myself a two-party system. My left leg dawdled or danced along, my right cleaved to the straight and narrow. My left shoulder was like a stripper on vacation, my right stood upright as a Roman soldier. Let's just say that my left side was the organ donor and leave my private parts alone. But as for my eyes, which are two shades of brown, well, Dionysus meet Apollo. Look at Eve raising her left eyebrow while Adam puts his right foot down. No one expected it to survive, but divorce seemed out of the question. I suppose my left hand and my right hand will be clasped over my chest in the coffin, and I'll be reconciled at last. I'll be whole again. Well, that led me somehow intuitively to philosopher Alan Watts, The Taboo of Knowing Who You Are. How about that for a title? And isn't that something for now? And examples royal of examinings and reconsiderings that we can get up to, as we were just hearing about the examining. He said this feeling of being lonely and very temporary visitors in the universe is in flat contradiction to everything known about man and all other living organisms in the sciences. We do not, quote, come into this world. We come out of it as leaves from a tree, as the ocean, quote, waves, the universe, quote, peoples. Every individual is an expression of the whole realm of nature, a unique action of the total universe. This fact is rarely, if ever, experienced by most individuals. Even those who know it to be true in theory do not sense or feel it, but continue to be aware of themselves as isolated, quote, egos inside bags of skin. Unless one is able to live fully in the present, the future is a hoax. There is no point whatever in making plans for a future which you will never be able to enjoy. When your plans mature, you will still be living for some other future beyond. You will never, never be able to sit back with full contentment and say, now I've arrived. The universe implies the organism, and each single organism implies the universe. Only the, quote, single glance of our spotlight, narrowed attention, which has been taught to confuse its glimpses with separate, quote, things, must somehow be opened to the full vision. Thank you, Alan Watts. And from there, the poet and philosopher David Whyte has some wisdom on belonging and how to be at home in yourself to offer us. How at home do you feel in your being as we speak, or recently? And did you before? Is it different? And do you want to be more so ahead of now? He said to feel as if you belong is one of the great triumphs of human existence, and especially to sustain a life of belonging and to invite others into that. But it's interesting to think that our sense of slight woundedness around not belonging is actually one of our core competencies, that though the crow is just itself, and the stone is just itself, and the mountain is just itself, and the cloud, and the sky, we are the one part of creation that knows what it's like to live in exile, and that the ability to turn your face toward home is one of the great human endeavors and the great human stories. It's interesting to think that no matter how far you are from yourself, no matter how exiled you feel from your contribution to the rest of the world or to society, that as a human being, all you have to do is enumerate exactly the way you don't feel at home in the world, to say exactly how you don't belong. And the moment you've uttered the exact dimensionality of your exile, you're already taking the path back to the way, back to the place you should be. You're already on your way home. Thank you, David Whyte. Well, someone I believe was wildly at home in himself was Walt Whitman. And this is from his Song of Myself, number 51. The past and present wilt. I have filled them, emptied them, and proceed to fill my next fold of the future. Listener up there, what have you to confide to me? Look in my face while I snuff the sidle of evening. Talk honestly, no one else hears you, and I stay only a minute longer. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. I concentrate toward them that are nigh. I wait at the door slab. Who has done his day's work? Who will soonest be through with his supper? Who wishes to walk with me? Will you speak before I am gone? Will you prove already too late? Thank you, Walt Whitman. There have always been great models of natural being and being-ness around us. Ponder the animals. This poem is called What Can We Learn? From our fellow animals, who are only ever and so beautifully, so wildly themselves, pure presence, each moment, no pretense, ambivalence, no choosing otherness. The great blue heron, the dolphin, humpback whale, the leopard and lion, the the mustang, the majestic elephant. And the rest of the living world, the remarkable realm of mountains and clouds, fjords and trees we share the planet with, paragons of wholeness, perfect models of naturalness, who show us the vibrancy and harmony of simply being at one. Imagine the freedom of denying nothing, being bravely visible in your animal skin, embodying, expressing your own clear and true human nature. And what if learning from the seasons, and not least this one of autumn that we're in? We'll soon be leaving. This is from Harvest Season by Danielle Trudeau from Keystone News. And, with that as a question, what seeds for the future are you planting? She says, I find comfort in the ever-changing seasons. It is both familiar and new. I also like the idea that part of the harvest season is about choosing and planting the seeds for the future. Sometimes I like to think of the seeds as powerful questions. What powerful questions are you posing to yourself right now? Or might you pose? Speaking of David White, he has a talk out from a few years ago called Hidden Harvest, the Inner Seasons of Everyday Life. It's a very good talk. You can find it on his site, I believe, and elsewhere. And he explores the way we often lack the patience to wait for a true ripening of our labors, instead moving on to new initiatives before the one for which we've worked a hard time has had time to flower. When we do this, we deprive ourselves of a deep celebration of harvest, one of the great experiences of human life. So that talk, Hidden Harvest, you might look out for that. I was thinking of an harvest of the poem by Rainer Maria Rilke from 1902. It's Herbsttag. And it's about the finding and missing of a fulfilling lifestyle. It's really based on the metaphors of autumn. And different stanzas deal with different aspects of autumn. And I thought that was very relevant. It's ultimately the perfection of nature is requested, and the consequences of missing perfection of humans' lives is depicted. So I thought you might like to hear it in two forms. One in the original German, I'll give it my best German today, Herbsttag, and then in English. Herr, es ist Zeit. Der Sommer war sehr groß. Leg deinen Schatten auf die Sonnenröhren, und auf den Flören las die Winde los. Befiehl den letzten Früchten, wohl zu sein. Gib ihnen noch 2 südlichere Tage. Dränge sie zur Wohlendung hin und jage die letzte süß in den schweren Wein. Wer jetzt kein Haus hat, baut sich keines mehr. Wer jetzt allein ist, wird es lange bleiben, wird wachen, lesen, lange Briefe schreiben und wird und den allen hin und her und ruhig wandern, wenn die Blätter treiben. Here's the A translation by Mary Kinsey, Day in Autumn. After the summer's yield lard, it is time to let your shadow lengthen on the sundials, and in the pastures let the rough winds fly. As for the final fruits, coax them to roundness. Direct on them 2 days of warmer light to hail them golden toward their term, and harry the last few drops of sweetness through the wine. Whoever's homeless now will build no shelter. Who lives alone will live indefinitely so, waking up to read a little draft-long letters, and along the city's avenues fitfully wander when the wild leaves loosen. Thank you, Rilke. Well, looked at one way, others could be said to have various, quote, incarnations on earth. Some of them may happen naturally, dramatically or subtly, and some may come about by conscious intent, by necessity or choice. This is a gut renovation after I came to this point myself years back. Stripping your life down to your bare walls, your innards, sometimes by choice, sometimes by force, by seismic events like great loss or divorce. Then starting over, starting fresh, this time with clear intention, wise design, deliberation, to build on the strengths and virtues of your sure inner structure, to create an inviting new living place for yourself that years and incarnations later you feel grand about inhabiting, daily thankful for renovating, deep down in your gut. Well, musing as I was on the harvest of our lives and autumn time and the metaphors and literal feelings of autumn and experiences of autumn was the richness of being in its way, and how much richer when we're in touch and in tune with the natural world. I came back to J. Drew Lanham, the poetic ornithologist and wildlife ecologist, and his memoirs of a colored man's love affair with nature. It's called The Home Place. Apple trees and tangles of muscadines hanged heavy. The fruit-dense orchards offer a final call to the wildlings, foxes, deer, coons, possum, and wild turkeys fatten in the feasting. The air is spiced with the scent of dying leaves. The perfume of decay gathers as berries ripen into wild wine. Even the sun sits differently in an autumnal sky, sending a mellower light and somber slants that foretell the coming change. When the moon glows in a mid-November sky like a pallid sun, I, too, am so soaked in wanting and wood's lust that I might as well wander like a warbler in the joyous urgency of it all. How's that for a man in touch with being, his being, and the being of nature? Thank you, J. Drew Lanham. Well, beyond, of course, autumn and autumning, falling, winter. And Catherine May, Wintering is her book, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. Lovely book, very helpful book, I suppose, in a way. And so soon past our now autumn, she talks about wintering. And, of course, Rilke also was a man who reverenced winter as the season for tending to the inner garden of the soul. He said suddenly, to be healed again and aware that the very ground of my being, he said, my mind and spirit was given time and space in which to go on growing. Well, May writes in her book, since childhood we're taught to ignore sadness, to stuff it down into our satchels and pretend it isn't there. As adults, we often have to learn to hear the clarity of its call. That is wintering. It is the active acceptance of sadness. It is the practice of allowing ourselves to feel it as a need. It is the courage to stare down the worst parts of our experience and to commit to healing them the best we can. Wintering is a moment of intuition, our true needs felt keenly. We are in the habit of imagining our lives to be linear, a long march from birth to death in which we mass our powers, only to surrender them again, all the while slowly losing our youthful beauty. This is a brutal untruth. Life meanders like a path through the woods. We have seasons when we flourish and seasons when the leaves fall from us, revealing our bare bones. Given time, they grow again. Hibernacle is a poem about a form of wintering, often an important time to, as Rilke said, to take and to be in and gestate in at points in our lives. Hibernacle, a sanctuary for one embering spirit, out of public view, other people's reach, a sacred inner place where fresh bread and honest wine for the soul are kept, to nourish it whenever more nourishment, more replenishment is needed, a hallowed place we can each learn to find, enter, be, for communing in solitude with our source, our kindling essence. Philosopher John O'Donohue offers this on selfhood, on the crucible of identity. It's crucial to understand that experience itself is not merely an empirical process of appropriating or digesting blocks of life. It's rather a journey of transfiguration. Both that which is lived and the one who lives it are transfigured. Selfhood is not an imperial possession of the human orphan. It's not exclusively human. Selfhood is more patient and ancient, a diverse intimacy of the earth with itself. If the earth has the most ancient networks of selfhood, then the memory of the earth is the ultimate harvester and preserver of all happening and experience. Taking experience seriously must make it equally necessary to take the destiny or future of experience seriously. It's a particularly poignant necessity given that the future of each experience is its disappearance, and the destiny of every experience is transience. It makes a ghost out of each experience. There was never a dawn that did not drop down into noon, never a noon which did not fade into evening, and never an evening that did not get buried in the graveyard of the night. Thank you, John O'Donohue. And the nature writer Henry Beston, it's from his so meaningful book, Northern Farm, which I've quoted once or twice or more over different programs apropos. The mechanical strain is in humanity, and if it has given us a machine civilization increasingly difficult to manage, it has also given us the wheel and the knife. Yet what we must ask today is whether or not the mechanical strain has increased out of all bounds and taken over an undue proportion of the way of life. It's well to use the wheel, but it is fatal to be bound to it. What has come over our age is an alienation from nature, unexampled in human history. It has cost us our sense of reality and all but cost us our humanity. With the passing of a relation to nature, worthy both of nature and the human spirit, with the slow burning down of the poetic sense, together with the noble sense of religious reverence to which it is allied, man has almost ceased to be man. Torn from earth and unaware, having neither the inheritance and awareness of man, nor the other sureness and integrity of the animal, we have become vagrants in space, desperate for the meaninglessness which is closed about us. True humanity is no inherent and abstract right, but an achievement, and only through the fullness of human experience may we be as one with all who have been and all who are yet to be, sharers and brethren and partakers of the mystery of living, reaching to the full of human peace and the full of human joy. Thank you, Henry Beston. And by the way, he wrote that, I think at least maybe in the 40s, at latest was, I believe, the 50s. So we're talking about over half a century ago. And look where we are right now. He could have said that today, and it been right on the mark. Bill Plotkin from animus.org. That's from his Soulcraft musings, which are marvelous. There's a whole series of them, and this one began, or at the beginning of it, there's only one question, how to love this world, was Mary Oliver's line. And he said, I agree with Mary Oliver. This is the question. Our principal and most essential inquiry at this time on planet Earth is not, for example, how to create a sustainable society. That's a good question, an urgent one, but not the most essential. How to create a life-enhancing society is closer to the mark, but still not it. It's this. What would it look like if we really loved this world, our more than human world, as fully as we're able, both individually and collectively? If enough of us got good at living this question, we'd be well on our way to building a healthier society that's not only sustainable, but life-enhancing. By getting better at loving this world, we'd also be doing all we can to foster species and human diversity, ecological health, climate stabilization, and life-enhancing governance. The primary question then is not, how do I take care of myself or my family or my community, but how do I care for the world? If this were the principal question enough of us lived, or the question most of us live most of the time, we would, among other things, be doing what's best for ourselves, our family, and our community. What does it mean to love the world? For everyone, it means to intimately know, deeply care about, and actively care for a particular place on earth, its creatures. Landforms, water, soils, and air, its health, integrity, and stories. We are born as that answer. We embark upon the journey of soul initiation to uncover and become the answer that has always been waiting within us. Thank you, Bill Plotkin. I came across, after that, a fellow named Carl R. Rogers on becoming a person, and it was a section of something he wrote back in 1961, The Good Life and the Fully Functioning Person. I actually wrote it in 1953, published in 61. I've gradually come to one negative conclusion about the good life. It seems to me that the good life is not any fixed state. It's not, in my estimation, a state of virtue or contentment or nirvana or happiness. It's not a condition in which the individual is adjusted or fulfilled or actualized, To use psychological terms, it's not a state of drive reduction or tension reduction or homeostasis. The good life is a process, not a state of being. It's a direction, not a destination. The direction which constitutes the good life is that which is selected by the total organism when there's a psychological freedom to move in any direction. This organismically selected, that's a new word to me, direction seems to have certain discernible qualities which appear to be the same in a wide variety of unique individuals. The good life, from the point of view of my experience, is the process of movement in a direction which the human organism selects when it's inwardly free to move in any direction, and the general qualities of this selected direction appear to have a certain universality. Well, he has much more on that, so you might want to look him up. Here's a poem, apropos, about being free to choose our way, our expression of self, our feeling for life, for nature, each other is certainly a cause célèbre for me, being fiercely my own sovereign person. Being at Liberty is the title. Living in a state of superfluidity, the gift, grail, remarkability to be wholly your own man or woman, to choose the flow you desire to go with, to dance footloose, freestyle, in any direction of desire, to know and feel what it is to be entirely at liberty in your body and spirit on this daily planet. Becoming. Here's Wikipedia. Becoming is the possibility of change. In the philosophical study of ontology, the concept of becoming originated in ancient Greece with the philosopher Heraclitus of Ephesus, who in the 6th century BC said that nothing in this world is constant except change and becoming. Everything is impermanent. It was made by him with the famous quote, "No man ever steps in the same river twice." So, around becoming, we must speak, I feel, of metamorphosis and how it can happen to us, does happen. Becoming a butterfly, brightly colored, abundantly winged, lighter than air. To become one, you must climb out of your chrysalis, out of your carapace, your unmetamorphosed self. Discover, then enter your newer, truer form, and fly forth, flutter freely into the wider, wilder world. Psychology Today, Mel Schwartz writes, from being to becoming, some people can't wait to transform. Others often ask why they have to change. And in that, he says, our mechanistic worldview has been entrenched since the 17th century. It's from this way of seeing that we've obfuscated flow and movement. In a participatory universe, the creative potential is the deity that supplants objectivity and rational thinking. For all conscious entities, the process of becoming puts us squarely in this new paradigm of personal evolution and participatory change. The process of becoming is forgiving. In the flow of it, we are no longer rooted in the hardship of fear, insecurity, or the notions of mistakes. A fuller participation in our unfolding life assists us in the art of living well. Becoming is open and unlimited. Being is structured and limiting. As the artist crafts their art, so might we look at our life. Learning to live artfully has us see our lives as a process open to inquiry and learning, always receptive to new meaning. Rob Bresney, in his latest E-letter, quotes the French critic Charles Dubois. The important thing, he said, is to be able at any moment to sacrifice what we are for what we could become. And Bresney says, did he really mean at any moment? Like while we're in a convenience store buying a magazine, while we're lying in bed, ready for sleep and reviewing the events of the day? While we're adrift in apathetic melancholy, watching too much TV and neglecting our friends? At any moment? I say yes. At all times and in all places, be ready to sacrifice what you are for what you could become. I found some glimmerings in Bernhard Günther's 2015 piece, Individuality, Embodiment, and the Anchoring of a Higher Frequency. And there were a couple of quotes that I thought were wonderful to share with all of you. Sam Harris, there's no telling how much I might change in the future. Just as one wouldn't draw a lasting conclusion about oneself on the basis of a brief experience of indigestion, One needn't do so on the basis of how one has thought or behaved for vast stretches of time in the past. A creative change of inputs to the system, learning new skills, forming new relationships, adopting new habits of attention, may radically transform one's life. Sam Harris. Philip Shepard from the Embodiment Manifesto. We need practices that will help us beyond, quote, listening to the body and instead enable us to listen to the world through the body. The task is not to make the body do new things that are good for us, but to surrender the tyrant's place in the head and yield to our embodied wisdom, which belongs to the world as much as to us and knows the whole so intimately that it recognizes its steadfast, unseen gaze in each individual pebble, star, and blade of grass. Philip Shepard. And one more by someone you would know of, Joseph Campbell. You must give up the life you planned in order to have the life that is waiting for you. Donald Justice has this poem, Men at 40. Men at 40 learn to close softly the doors to rooms they will not be coming back to. At rest on a stair landing, they feel it moving beneath them now like the deck of a ship, though the swell is gentle. And deep in mirrors they rediscover the face of the boy as he practices tying his father's tie there in secret, and the face of that father, still warm with the mystery of lather. They are more fathers than sons themselves now. Something is filling them, something that is like the twilight sound of the crickets, immense, filling the woods at the foot of the slope behind their mortgaged houses. Thank you, Donald Justice. Well, here's a poem of mine about this. May be interesting to see the virtues of social tribes, but also the downsides of them, the straitjacketing of free being, of free expression that can happen, depending on what kind of tribe it is. And this is from New York City's East Side, as I observed its ethos at different points. I lived on the West Side for decades, but occasionally would venture over to the East. Being Mayflowerly Tribal is the title. Is their social Bible, sworn to till death, even before birth. What's to them truer is their blood. It's bluer. And what's judgeable isn't fudgeable or expungible. Staying in and under control, that's how they roll. If you're not a member, brother, take a powder. The Mayflowerly Tribal, pray, heed the parable. Hermetically Unsealed is a poem about opening up, staying open, staying unbottled, uncorked. You can try and seal parts of yourself off, isolate your flows, floods of thoughts or feelings from possible or actual breaches of mind or heart. Make yourself airtight, watertight as a way to avert, contain feared damage to your emotional hull. Fine for a seagoing ship, but contrary to nature, unnatural to the natural way of all life-going bodies, whose porousness makes them counter-culturally more impervious, less sinkable, where everything works as a whole in a wholly unenclosed flow, free exchange of information, energy, essence, that each of us needs to be fully, freely alive, buoyant, conversant, and ever emergent within, with each, without. I think of part of each becoming we may come to me, is about both letting go of what no longer belongs or no longer serves and allowing what wants to come in, what wants to change. This is called All the Layers. It was written for a very dear friend, a soul brother, on his 61st birthday. But it applies, I'd say, to all of us. All the layers, it's called. All the layers. From them and through them. The thin to the thick, arduous to porous, of life's layers, of all the plaster and varnish, stripping and priming from your upbringing and upheaving to your uplifting and uprighting. The endless igneous strata that have formed you, that you have over time, Kairos time, your own consciously chosen time, shaped and reshaped, to become who you now more fully and truly are, who, beyond all those layers, under and over layerings, most desire to be. William Stafford has this poem, The Way It Is. It's a poem central to the holding to our essence, no matter what. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do stops time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. Thank you, William Stafford. David White, once more, but in a different vein, speaks from his book Consolations of Forms of Harvest, and one of them as beauty as the harvest of presence. And, I've done a program on presence and speak at many points about it in relation to many themes. And he says, it's the evanescent moment of seeing or hearing on the outside what already lives far inside us. The eyes, the ears, or the imagination suddenly become a bridge between the here and the there, between then and now, between the inside and the outside. Beauty is the conversation between what we think is happening outside in the world and what is just about to occur far inside. Thank you. Again, David White. How do you feel about beauty, about truth, about goodness, about your humanness? Many of my sentiments, well, here's some more. It's this truth, beauty, and goodness. Things worth transcending to. Places daily possible. Through choices of thought, desire, feeling. Emerson was onto something. Outside the mind and the empirical, inside the intuition and the individual, the spiritual, the original, where the world and the soul freely commune, commingle. A getting down, an opening up to essence, where truth lives with beauty, with goodness, with pure humanness. Mark Strand's poem, Old Man Leaves Party, is a beautiful paean to being embodied with joy and a deep sense of promise. Old Man Leaves Party. It was clear when I left the party that though I was over 80, I still had a beautiful body. The moon shone down as it will on moments of deep introspection. The wind held its breath. And look, somebody left a mirror leaning against a tree. Making sure that I was alone, I took off my shirt. The flowers of beargrass nodded their moon-washed heads. I took off my pants, and the magpies circled the redwoods. Down in the valley, the creaking river was flowing once more. How strange that I should stand in the wilds alone with my body. I know what you are thinking. I was like you once. But now, with so much before me, so many emerald trees and weed-whitened fields, mountains and lakes, how could I not be only myself, this dream of flesh, from moment to moment? Thank you, Mark Strand. A different poem for a different friend, Carlos Kirsis, out there in the world. I have to reach out to him. I haven't spoken with him in a while. But again, I believe for us all, it's because the spirit never ages. The joys of life are edgeless, ageless, out of every boundedness. They flow with ease, with light and sound, color and consciousness. When you can awake each day with spirit, bring to your day a lively eye, a lively heart, a lively mind. Engage and behold the wonders, great and small, old and new, the everywhere beauty, innocence, serendipity. From the wild green majesty of a forest to the wild blue bounty of an ocean, to the wild white poetry and purity of snow-capped mountains, when you can rise and breathe in the fresh air of possibility, for deep feeling, holy loving, inner peace and outer harmony. Whoever and wherever you are, however long you've lived or may be living in the world, because the spirit never grows old, despite the body's waxing and waning, never fades or slows, only shines, sings forth, readily, only flows timelessly, freely and ever joyfully upon your inviting, upon your allowing. Lewis Thomas has a book called Late Night Thoughts on Listening to Mahler's Ninth Symphony, and it's really about our human potential. And he said, we are in for one surprise after another if we keep at it and keep alive. We can build the structures for human society never seen before, thoughts never thought before, music never heard before. Jane Hirschfield has this poem, Wood, Salt, Tin. Little soul, do you remember? You once walked over wooden boards to a house that sat on stilts in the sea. It was early. The sun painted brightness onto the water, and wherever you sat, the path led directly to you. Some mornings the sea road was muted, scratched tin, some mornings blinding. Then it would leave. Little soul, it is strange. Even now it is early. And this from me, soul to soul, your soul to the world's soul, your heart to the world's heart, your mind to the world's mind, microcosm to macrocosm, connecting, conversing, co-creating. Soul to soul. This one, in with the good air. In with the good air, with the good earth, with the good self, with this remarkably good life, this gift of being alive, of being awake in the world, of being awake to the world around and inside, to all the goodness and lightness of this world, despite its sadness, darkness, to all the possibilities for living each day in states of greaterness, in states of gratefulness. Heraclitus not only said, no man ever steps in the same river twice, he also said, everything is made of light. Paul Cézanne, the painter Paul Cézanne, said, everything we see is light. And a sojourner truth is, you must shine your own light. So here's a clarion call of mine to you toward that, because we need light beings, light bearers, light workers and warriors more than ever right now in the world. Being of light. Be a man, a woman, a child of light, a bearer of light, a kindler and keeper of light that beacons in all directions, sweeps over dark seas, stony shores, the faces of vessels, of sailors, of known and unknown voyagers. Well, as we wind toward the last of our time for now, a few more things. I love writer-poet Diane Ackerman on the secret life of the senses and the measure of our aliveness. And this is from her book, A Natural History of the Senses. There's no way in which to understand the world without first detecting it through the radar net of our senses. They define the edge of consciousness, and because we're born explorers and questers after the unknown, we spend a lot of our lives pacing that windswept perimeter. We take drugs, we go to circuses, we tramp through jungles, we listen to loud music, we purchase exotic fragrances, we pay hugely for culinary novelties and are even willing to risk our lives to sample a new taste. In Japan, chefs offer the flesh of the pufferfish or fugu, which is highly poisonous unless prepared with exquisite care. The most distinguished chefs leave just enough of the poison in the flesh to make the diner's lips tingle so that they know how close they are to coming to their mortality. Our senses, which feel so personal and impromptu at seem at times to divorce us from other people, reach far beyond us. They're an extension of the genetic chain that connects us to everyone who has ever lived. They bind us to other people and to animals across time and country and happenstance. They bridge the personal and the impersonal, the one private soul with its many relatives, the individual with the universe, all of life on earth. The great affair, the love affair with life, is to live as variously as possible, to groom one's curiosity like a high-spirited thoroughbred, climb aboard and gallop over the thick, sun-struck hills every day. When there is no risk, the emotional terrain is flat and unyielding, and despite all its dimensions, valleys, pinnacles, and detours, life will seem to have none of its magnificent geography, only a length. It began in mystery, and it will end in mystery. But what a savage and beautiful country lies in between. Thank you, Diane Ackerman. Let's go there. Let's keep going there. remarkable polymathic poet, painter, novelist, philosopher, Etel Adnan. At 95, she wrote this book called Shifting the Silence in her mid-90s. And she said, I'm in the midst of whatever I'm thinking of. There are fires in California. They've returned. I'm burning. And one of the trees that's disappearing in the fire is my body, black and gray, becoming ashes. I need to simplify my thinking, to come to the roots of the olive trees I've planted on my island, sit close to them, look at every leaf, start early in the morning, then close my eyes and let the morning sun touch my face. Go to the Mediterranean at the street corner, go to its water, its salt, its acid colors, its heat, stop thinking, just be, and for many hours in a row merge with this vegetal and metallic kind of consciousness which is so overpowering. Being or not being cannot be dealt with thinking, but are matters of experience. Their intensity creates waves that invade us, that leave us stunned. Thank you, Etel Adnan. Also has created many beautiful artworks. Here's a poem about that, to her point. We are an experience of being, waking, seeing, tasting, seeking, loving, growing, unfolding, inviting, touching, embracing, desiring, arriving, expressing, breathing, feeling, wondering, deepening, dreaming, freeing, flowing, allowing, being. And from 2017 arose this question: is it time for contemplating all that is already coalescing around your next earthly incarnation, already effervescing around your burgeoning imagination? All that needs simply your recognition. The school leader and independent scholar Brad Kirshner, Kershner, talks about the power and of meditation, bringing ourselves into alignment and experiencing directly the reintegration of self, nature, and body. We simply recognize what's happening naturally, breathe sensations and the intelligence of the body and the environment, and have an ongoing experience. We don't realize that we are the natural world because we're not in alignment. We're out of tune, literally killing ourselves. And it's this disembedding, the separation, the sense that humanity is something distinct from nature that's at the root of the dysfunctions and pathologies of our current stage. The great integration is manifest in the innermost presence of our individual experience. When our mind and body are aligned, we can realize that it's actually all one thing. In this sense of alignment, healing and wholeness that needs to be manifest at the collective level, in the ways we relate to each other in our environment, my experience and yours in the becoming of the world and all its chaos and violence and beauty is one integrated reality. The good news and the true ground of hope is that this is already happening, whatever else we may think is going on. In the words of Arundhati Roy, we can affirm that, quote, another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. Another William Stafford poem as we come just near the end here. Silver Star. To be a mountain, you have to climb alone and accept all that rain and snow. You have to look far away when evening comes. If a forest grows, you care. You stand there leaning against the wind, waiting for someone with faith enough to ask you to move. Great stones will tumble against each other and gouge your sides. A storm will live somewhere in your canyons, hoarding its lightning. If you're lucky, people will give you a dignified name and bring crowds to admire how sturdy you are, how long you can hold still for the camera. And sometime, they say, if you last long enough, you will hear God. A voice will roll down from the sky, and all your patience will be rewarded. The whole world will hear it. Well done. Thank you, William Stafford. And remember, let us remember deep down, you can never lose your soul. You can lose your money, friends, your teeth, your temper, your appetite, your perspective, your nerve, even your way in life, but you can never lose your soul, your truest north, the reason for being, our reason for loving. And the great giant-minded, giant-souled Carl Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And on a closing note for now, one last poem, mine, of our sharings and musings today. Never doubt your gifts, your greatness, your innocence, your positivity, your possibility. For you are flowing with such light, can overflow with such joy, become ever more vital in the world. Thank you again for leaning in, floating, and feeling in, for being present for this latest spelunking through our beingness and becoming. On listening, just a few words. What I know for many of you and consciously intended by me is that some of you like the frisson of listening to the shows at the hour they air, like right now. I also curate and share forth an abundance of material each time that, like a flourless chocolate cake, can be quite rich to take in all at once. My suggestion is simply to take in as little or as much as you like. Focus on whatever resonates. Not everything has to speak with you, speak to you. And like various listeners, you can go back later through a replay where you can pause to take in or take in more fully different poems or commentaries or segments at your own pace. Aside from those unable to tune in live, listening to the replays later gives you the freedom to listen and muse while you're out walking or driving or easing back another time of your own choosing, at home or elsewhere. To send me a note, by the way, with a question like some of the other listeners do from time to time, I'd love to hear from you. My email is colin@thepoetorialist.com. I bring my best self daily to listen close in, to feel close in to the outer world and the inner one and to you, and respond with these shows and other poetic offerings and infusings and livenings and upliftings. If you want to express your thanks with a donation, you can do so by PayPal or Venmo or directly through my site, thepoetorialist.com, or simply by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. If you're a patron or know one who'd like to explore hosting me as a poet in residence, privately as a working poet in residence, to bring forth a new body of poetic art and dedicate it to that patron, please reach out. Likewise, fellow artists who'd like to collaborate on projects musical to theatrical. You can hear all my broadcasts online, on YouTube, for now as replays, and soon all past and new shows on Spotify, Google, Anchor.fm, and elsewhere. I hope you lean in again next week, or soon again. Until then, dear listeners, here's to engaging and expressing your being, your truest self, full on, every way, every day, and to inviting and embracing your becoming, your becomings, each one through the course of your life, because they can be beautifully never-ending. Goodbye for now, and good